PSD EdTech Coaches Podcast, Episode 17. Let the students do the heavy lifting. Welcome to the PSD EdTech Coaches podcast for educators by educators that love to equip teachers, ponder, and discuss current issues and climate in education. With your hosts, Dan Hopman and Steve Stuckey. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
And good evening.
Wherever you guys may be.
This is the Palmdale School District Teachers EdTech Podcast. I am your co-host, Steve Stuckey, along with my other co-host, Dan Hopman.
How's it going, everyone? Guys, we're almost there. The finish line is right ahead of us.
We have 9 working days as of this recording left to get everything done.
Everything done. Report cards, ELD report cards, SLD report cards, CUMES. It seems like it's a big checklist for the end of the year.
It is a huge checklist. And, normally I find this time to be a little stressed without remote teaching. And I'm sure with everything that has to happen, the stress levels have got to be going up. I think part of that is that teachers have expectations. They expect 100% of themselves. They expect 100% from their kids. And, let's be honest, they're not seeing the 100% participation in their classrooms. Some kids never checking in, some hardly ever, some not doing any of the work. And I think that hurts teachers deeply because they care so much about those kids and wanting them to be successful that this is hard for them to have any closure.
And that's the big thing. You're used to doing your end of the year activities. You're used to, doing that one thing that the kids get to take home that you're known for. And you just don't get to do that this year, or at least if you might be able to with distance learning, but not with all your kids. So it's been, it's a tough ending of the year.
Some are trying to be creative and come up with, fun ways to end it. Some are still trying to figure out how to get it started. And this is going to be a lot of learning time, I guess, over the summer, just to prepare ourselves for the worst, hope for the best when school year comes around. Who knows what it's going to look like yet?
That's definitely going to be different no matter what, no matter how we start, whether it's in the classroom or at home like we are now. So, yeah, I think I know you've said it multiple times over the last few weeks, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And it's hard because I know teachers are used to knowing what's in the future and we just don't know.
Well, we become teachers, creatures of habit. And we like things to go the way we have it planned or at least thought out in our head. And 2020 is throwing all that away, and we're going to have to learn to change, adapt, and really pull ourselves up because, to be honest, I've had stories of teachers who are depressed along with kids who are depressed. This is not their normal operating standards. They like to be with people. They like to be in front of the kids. They want to inspire kids that way, and it's hard to do when you're looking through a screen.
It really is, and I know our teachers have tried really hard to make those connections with their kids. I know one of the things that you and I used to do at the very end of the year when we were in the classroom is our wish list for next year. What do we want to try? What do we want to improve on? That might be something that teachers really can help kind of in their year out, even though they it's not usual, but, they can kind of start thinking, well, if we start in distance learning, this is the way I would do it now after learning all this stuff. Or if I'm back in the classroom, here's how I would change just in case.
Well, I would agree with that totally, thinking ahead, but also to think that you are not going to do it all, but find a couple things that you felt might have been weak as far as your pedagogy with distance learning, and try to tweak just 1 or 2 of those things first, get those under your belt, and then move on to something else that you can have this continuous cycle of improvement with yourself. And hopefully then you will see that improvement start happening with the kids.
Yeah, do one thing, move on, do it well, but it's the planning, really start looking toward the future and really plan.
One of the things that also has teachers kind of down, I guess, is this whole idea of grades. And, this is a time that really kids are passing, and some of them haven't really done anything to prove it. Some kids aren't even working. I think that hurts teachers somewhere deep down. Now, I know there's some that want to hold every kid accountable. The grades are the carrot out there. I think you and I, Dan, have talked quite a bit. We'd rather just throw out grades and build up a culture and mindset of wanting to improve, but that's nothing that's going to happen overnight. There needs to be some kind of revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that we've been preaching over the last, I don't know how many weeks now, I've lost count, about really looking at improvement in the kids and not really looking at their achievement, really focusing on that, I think can kind of change our mindset a lot. And I think maybe where we are right now with grades might be a good opportunity to reassess how we look at grades globally, even if we were back in the classroom.
Well, and not only that, I think still teachers are kind of upset because they really aren't sure that, they're being effective, first of all, and whether or not the kids are actually learning. I think we're going to focus a little bit about that today. But to be honest, I know equity is an issue, that some kids don't even have connections. Home life is an issue. There's only certain things that we can control. But at some point, I think teachers are getting upset that there's no accountability on the other end of the line or the internet connection that's going on. And they really want to see kids successful, and they can't do it if they know that nothing's going to happen. Even if we weren't in a remote teaching place, we can probably say that, the system's a little broken. We need to fix how people approach learning and how we assess learning and how we teach the kids to get there.
Yeah, and it's a complete change of mindset, and I'm hoping that the situation we're in now helps change that mindset and really pushes people to progressive forward and
Right.
not stay in the back with all the grades and A, B, C, D, F, and really look at the future. How can we really help the kids?
So if you're listening to this and you have decision-making powers, things need to be fixed. I'm just going to say it. Things need to be fixed, and it can't just be on the teacher's shoulders, even though that's the only thing they can control. We need to find ways to bring kids into the mindset, families into the mindset, increase the equitable opportunities that those who don't have it do have it, so that everybody's on that playing field. But we have to, testing, it doesn't really hold anybody accountable. When you're just giving grades, and I understand the whole reason why we're doing it the way we're doing it right now, we really want to make sure our kids are learning. 100% of them. I started off this saying teachers are 100% kind of people. And they want not 9 kids coming in and doing the work in their classroom. They want 100% of them, and they want 100% to succeed. So how do we get to that point? I don't think we're going to come to answers during this ramble, but it has to happen.
It really does. And, I know the teacher in me looks at even though I don't hold a lot in the grades, but a lot of times it holds a little bit of, was I effective? Did I do what I was supposed to? Even with no pass, and no data, that has no bearing on me as a teacher. I don't know that I've really affected how the kids have learned. It tells me that I've kept track that they've been with me during online learning. It's a tough spot for teachers. And I think that's a lot of the attitude that we're getting from the teachers is, but how do we know that we've been effective? What do we, P and ND don't give us much information.
Right. And to be honest, people feeling done. And that's too bad, because I think this highlighted a lot of things that we need to improve on. Grades, pedagogy, technology skills, compassion, grace, all of those things are
Yeah,
things that I think have been highlighted about, hey, us as an educational community need to deal with.
absolutely. And I
Not
know we
not
can
just
talk
talk,
about
not
this.
just talk about them. So
Actually, yeah, I actually have to start making some changes.
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I know we can talk about this and,
Oh man, you know, this is
forever.
this is not even on the script here, and we're just, there's so many things that we could about this. We need a campfire going.
We really do.
So
Campfire talks.
So just to depress you guys a little bit more, just to remind you that the report card window for S2 is open, and Dan has made a video for that. It is on our website, which is
palmdalesd.org/edtech.
also on that website are the directions for creating the ELD, SLD report cards, and how to take those report cards, download them, and upload them into Elevation. If you have already watched those videos and have already started, cheers to you. If you have not, Tuesday, 2:00.
Yeah, so Tuesday at 2:00, Steve, myself, and the ladies, we're going to be on there. We're going to do a quick run through on the report card, the SLD and ELD report card, and then we're just going to kind of hang out in the chat and take some questions from you. We're just going to do a general FAQ. And so if you have any questions, maybe how to start next year, how to end this year, pop on and ask the question. We'd love to answer it for you.
Yeah, this would be a great time for you to start actually creating those Google Classrooms, setting up your dojo, Hapara workspaces, whatever it is that you use to deliver content. Get them set up now. You don't have to have all the content filled out, but some of the basics can already be in place for you. And you can then start thinking about how you can better organize what you did during these last couple months and improve on it for the possibility of doing some online teaching.
Yeah, clean up those Google Classrooms. There's a video that came out where I was talking about how to archive those classrooms. I think Jerry did one on Class Dojo, Melissa on how to clean up our workspace. But get things cleaned up so you can start off brand new. Like Steve said, start those classrooms this year. So that way in August, when we come back, whatever that looks like, you'll have your Google Classroom ready to go on the first day of school.
We'd also like to remind you that we don't mind talking to each other, but we surely like involving you. And we would love for you to be part of the show. There's a form located at our website, which is at
palmdalesd.org/edtech.
And you can fill out the form. Tell us what you want to talk about. We'll even sort of work part of the show around your interests, your expertise, and what it is that you want to discuss. So fill that out and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Well, so this show is titled, how are we going to, or how do we let the students do the heavy lifting rather than us all the time?
Yeah, it's whenever I get to walk classrooms before all this happened, my admin will always ask me, so what did you see? And I would always answer, the teachers were doing a lot of the work. The teachers were working very hard. The students, not so much. So how do we branch off and flip that script a little bit and really make it to where the students are doing that lifting and not the teacher?
Well, as a teacher, I've always had those magic moments where, the kids are so into what's going on, they have no idea that time is passing. That's when you've dialed it in, that you have increased the cognitive demand on those kids to just that point where they are working, learning, thinking, collaborating. It's a great moment, but we need to have those moments most of the time, not just some of the time.
So the question is how do you get there? And so one of those things that you can start doing is pre-assessing your kids. A lot of times our kids already know some stuff about what you're about to teach, and you lose them and they get bored, and and the time that Steve's talking about gets lost because they're counting the seconds instead of looking up and realizing that time has gone by so quickly. So pre-assessing what your kids know is a huge.
And using that pre-assessment helps you and I've already used the word dial it in. So I want you to sort of think that, when you go to a concert, the band gets up and plays, but there's a sound guy who deals with all the dials. And every night, the room is different, and the dials have to be tweaked and turned. And even during the show, the dials get tweaked and turned to make it just at that perfect point, that perfect level. And if we pre-assess kids, it helps us tweak those dials so we know what they're interested in and what they need to know, as opposed to what they already do know. And we can make our content that much more relevant.
Very much so. And I know I get a lot of excuses of, well, we've never taught this before. How in the world would they have any type of background in it? But our kids do have some real world experience. Give them credit for that. You never know. They may have picked something up on their own.
And part of that is that you don't have to give them all, and you don't have to be the one up there for 40 minutes giving them all of the information. Part of determining level of rigor is that, why don't you try completing the task first, and if you find it really challenging, lower it down a bit, because then younger kids can do it. But you want to keep that rigor up. So maybe one of those things is that you get them to start doing all of the pre-searching on things and learning about the topic before you even begin. And then they will have some background knowledge.
Yeah, and if like you were saying, if you can time yourself and figure, well, that took me a long time. Maybe it's too rigorous for your kids. Cut it back. Make sure that while you're going through it, that you're being very explicit with the instructions on the task. Kids get lost in details very easily, and if they're not very explicit, those kids are going to be lost for a very long time.
Well, so the difference is between complicated and complex. Sometimes things that we want things to be complex. Those are the things that engage our brains, that are interesting to us. But sometimes our instructions are too complicated or too ambiguous. There's not enough context, and those are obstacles that keep kids from dealing with the complexity of things. Your directions need to be very precise, very clear.
And also ask for feedback from your kids on those directions. That way, the next time you give them, you can make sure you're a lot more explicit.
So you mean you don't just go thumbs up if you get it? That's
exactly.
That's feedback, but probably not that much feedback. And you're going to get the kid who doesn't really get it going to give you thumbs up because they don't want to be bothered. You need to have honest feedback to see if they do understand it. And I guess you'll know when you see the quality of the work.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that's very constructive either, because it's not very specific from the kids. You want feedback. How can I make the instructions more clear? What didn't you understand?
So beyond just being very explicit in what you are doing as far as directions, you need to let the kids know what it is that success looks like. What is the target that they want to hit or that they should hit?
Yeah, it's, we talk about rubrics a lot, and making sure that the kids really understand for example, in writing, maybe what a 5 paper is. What does a 4 paper look like? 3. What does success look like? Give an example, build that student buy-in by generating that scoring rubric together. Do it with your students.
Yeah, you need to spell out exactly what you're looking for. The ambiguity cannot be there. You cannot assume that they're going to know what to do. And then you brought up writing. My kids can't write. They're not good writers. Have you ever given them the targets? Have you ever given them the criteria for success, and then let them go after it? Provide your feedback to help build that up so that they do learn how to do those things that are complex.
And, the pre-assessment we talked about earlier also helps with differentiation. Confidence from the students, and their endurance will soar with the right supports. And one of those things is being able to give them choice. Their product does not have to be the same for each of them. Allow them to have choice. Give them resources that you've already collected so that they can make and stay locked in, make those choices for themselves.
Right. So choice boards would be a great way to do that, to help push the learning. It's all things that you want them to do and to know, just different ways of going about it. Great way to differentiate. But we really want those products and the content that they put really make them like they've accomplished something and have some great pride in it.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this article that we're referencing is they talk about this metacognition, the likelihood that students will engage in the productive struggle of repeating what you want them to show in their learning. And I've used to do this all the time whenever I had to answer a question, stopping the class, all eyes on me, and answering the question for everyone. And it really does stop the momentum that the kids develop as they're working. But so posting something up in the room, posting an answer, maybe putting it on a Padlet that they can refer to on their Chromebooks. So that way you don't have to interrupt their learning. They have something to reference.
Right.
I think that's a big deal.
If they have a question in the middle of something, rather than blurting it out, raising their hand, stopping the whole thing, they can put it up on a whiteboard app. They can put it up on something like Padlet. If you're using Google Slides to present, there's a question and answer part to that when you're presenting. There's a lot of ways that you can do that, but they need to know that you're going to answer their questions at some point, just maybe not right now. And by the way, I always think of metacognition as, thinking about your thinking. And we want kids to be thinking about their thinking and why they're thinking that.
Yeah, and what I like about the idea, what this definition of metacognition that they use, is that it does lead to that uninterrupted processing and application. They have all the time, and it allows them just to get things done. There's no time wasted with, okay, I'm waiting for everybody, or all eyes on me, and you're just waiting for everyone to pay attention. It really gives them that uninterrupted processing and gets things done.
One of the things that I would probably say that I was guilty of is I would be giving them this time. They're totally into it, and I'm working the room, and one of the kids had a great question for me, and I go, the whole class would really appreciate this question. And so what do? I break the whole flow. I stop the whole class. Everybody pay attention right now. We got this great question. I want you to hear the answer. But you know what? Most of them, now that I'm thinking about it, most of them probably didn't have that same problem and may never even encounter the same kind of problem, but I felt it was worthy. So maybe one of the things you can do so you don't interrupt their processing time, they're working together while they're creating, is to find a place to post those things up on a wall someplace, communicate it somehow. And if they know where it is, they can go look. It's sort of like an FAQ on a wall.
Yeah, and it gives the kids the kids can even answer themselves in that FAQ. It doesn't have to be teacher directed either.
Right. So, bottom line is when we want to get kids to do the heavy lifting, we have to stop doing it, first of all, but provide the right environment and materials and sort of facilitate the students into becoming those heavy lifters themselves. I said at the beginning, it's kind of like the sound guy at a rock concert, putting the demand on your kids from lesson to lesson, day to day, year to year. Those they've been able to dial in cognitive demand. It takes small tweaks all the time. There are no presets. You can't set it and say, this is the way it is every kid, every year, every day. You have to do those changes. That's part of the art of teaching.
And it doesn't mean that you set the kids off on their own and you're done with them and they just do their project and they're done. There's still learning going on. So there's a lot of things you can do to make sure that they're checking on that learning and really understanding what they're interacting with and retaining that information.
All right. So, hopefully this gives you guys some ideas, or at least encourages listeners to think about how they might change what they do to make the kids do more of the thinking. And you can't say they don't know how, they haven't done. You need to teach them how. It is small steps. And that's part of tweaking the dials. You know, you're not going to put the volume on 11 to start. You're going to be down at 1 probably. And you're going to help give those scaffolds to get them to a point where you have to do less tweaking with those dials to increase the cognitive demand for the students. But if you keep doing it, it's never going to happen.
Got to be in their laps.
All right. Have you had enough of that one, Dan?
I think so.
So the kids are doing all this work. Their cognitive demand is high. They are in the zone. They're creating, synthesizing, applying what they've learned. How do you know if they know it?
Well, and you can't sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to let them work on the project and that's it. Whatever the project is, that means they know it or they don't.
But I gave them a rubric. They know what's supposed to happen.
Yes, but as facilitators, we need to make sure that we're guiding our kids to the right learning. And so the question would be is, are you checking for understanding as the kids are working?
Yeah, that's one of the great things about when they are doing the lifting and they're doing the working, that frees you up to work the room, to look at students' work in Google Classroom and provide those little bits of feedback that will help steer them in a direction of greatness.
And so the question would be is, how would you check your work in the room? How are you checking for understanding?
Well, what I'm not doing is saying, did everybody get this? Anybody not understand? Because I've seen it and I've been guilty of it. You don't really care. You ignore who rose their hand, who didn't. Some don't even bother raising their hand. So you have to have concrete ways, and I think you have to look at the work. You have to see what they're producing. You have to ask them questions and have them defend their work. Those kind of things make them do the lifting and the fixing.
Well, and it's also a good example for the kids that when you're asking them good questions, that when they don't understand something, they learn to ask those good questions back. So checking for understanding really is a two-way street.
I guess the other thing is you really need to know what your purpose is and why you're checking, right? If you are checking
Absolutely.
just because, you want to make sure they're not failing or that they are going to get an A, if it's all about the grades, I guess, your purpose might be a little bit skewed. Are you checking that they understand?
Yeah. And, thumbs up, thumbs down doesn't really do it. If it's in math, maybe you're actually working and making them work out some type of an exit ticket, some sort of, hey, here's the application problem, work it out. I'm going to be walking around. They've got to be doing something. If they're not doing very much, there's no way that they have any way of showing you what they've learned.
Yeah, it would be great if you can find ways to link some of the older learning to what's happening now. That increases the complexity. Have them defend the work.
Yeah, and I mean they've got to be able. And again, they've got to be able to demonstrate, not just. I many times asking the questions, and you see the kids' heads turn left and right, trying to figure out, okay, who's going to ask the question? If you've built up enough rapport with them, they should be answering pretty quickly. So making sure that you have developed that connection with your kids and make them demonstrate their understanding, not just tell you. They've got to be able to show you.
If you start looking at questions and start asking the higher level questions, kids will be used to hearing them and they will start asking higher level questions. Have them write some of their own questions. I mean, if you're going to give a test, why not always include a couple of theirs? There's some buy-in right then.
Absolutely. And everyone needs to kind of keep in mind that at some point, everyone, when we get back to whatever is as normal as we can get, is going to be held accountable for student learning. Guaranteed. It's going to be we're going to get back into school. We're going to have this learning gap from the last few months. And it's going to be a lot of how are you holding your kids accountable? And that goes for teachers. It goes for students. It's going to go for admin. It's going to go for everybody. How are you holding everyone accountable? And how do you make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to?
So another thing is providing problem-solving activities that can be done individually and group, which really helps them, I guess, not just do heavy lifting, but to have some productive struggle and know that the problem-solving time is going to take some time, but you need to tweak maybe what you do because the benefits will outweigh you working through, 4 minutes on this part of a lesson, 5 minutes on this part of the lesson, 2 minutes on this part of the lesson. Let me go over all the application problems. Give them time to try to apply the skills.
And the kids will adapt. They will, if you set that bar high, you give them those high expectations, your kids will almost always achieve those in life. You got to make sure you're setting those bars high.
Yeah, and part of the way you do that is you do set a time limit. You don't sit there and say, well, does anybody need more time? You decide, having worked it out yourself, how much do you think these kids are going to need? You give them time to go through it. And then when it's due, it's due. It's their turn to present and their turn to defend. You don't necessarily even have to collect it. Make them share how they solve the problem. You will get an instant idea whether or not they could cognitively handle it, on whether or not they finished, or what they did is way off based upon the skills they should have already had.
So some examples you can do with your kids, for the last couple of years, we've talked about exit tickets in the district. It can be more, it has to be more than just multiple choice. Make them work out the problem. Reflecting on student learning, journal, discussion, creating, great ways for kids to reflect.
Explain how they know.
Yeah.
What a great question. Tell me how you know. What makes you think you understand this?
Yeah, and it sparks thought, because Steve literally just asked that question. I'm like, wait a second, my mind automatically starts working with how can I, answer that question, even though I know it's not directed at me. It gets kids thinking.
Who says it wasn't?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So keep in mind too, we're talking about kids showing their work, but how do you have kids synthesize their knowledge?
Well, what's interesting though is that at no point here, I don't think we've brought up a single EdTech product or solution tonight, have we?
Not one.
Yeah, not that I can think of. And so, I'll play it back and think and see if we did, but the technology is not the driving force in any of this of making kids do the heavy lifting. Increasing their cognitive load has everything to do with your practice, tweaking it based upon data that you've collected. But there is some things that technology does help, and it becomes the tool for kids to be able to share their learning, explain their learning, and that really then starts with some planning that once you know what the kids are expected and the kids know what they are expected to know, then you can start tying in some of your planning what technology pieces could be available for them.
And some of those ways you can look at it while you're doing your planning, and you've heard us say this for the last few years, is stuff like the SAMR model. Keep in mind that whenever we talk about any of these models, it's not like a stepping stone where you start your kids on S or substitution and then we move to augmentation. It really is based on your lessons. What do you want the product to look like? And how do you get your kids there? Apply the SAMR model so you can watch them get into that level of rigor. The other one is being Tpack, and I haven't had much experience with Tpack. I really like the SAMR model.
Yeah, well, Tpack, what I really like about it, and it's worth reading a little bit, is that it takes more of the areas, so you have the technical knowledge that you need, you have your content knowledge, and as a teacher, you have your pedagogical knowledge, something like that. It's Friday. And when planned well, all these things meet in the middle, and they become a great way to enhance learning in your classroom. So check it out. It's Tpack, Tpack.org, Tpack.org. We'll give you some good ideas about it.
But the reminder is that tech is a tool. It's not the goal. It's not, hey, we have 35 Chromebooks. We have to use those today. It's really, today we're learning about the water cycle. Why don't we get on the Chromebooks and research what the water cycle is, and let's create. So it's about showing the learning and understanding, not about just the fact that we have tech and we have to use it.
Right. I think if anything, then that these last 60 some odd days now, is it? I've lost count, but
Yeah.
probably over 60 days of stay at home, is that we have really learned which part of our practices are weak and what needs to be improved. And instead of getting down about it, it's pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go make some of those changes so that when the new year starts, both you and your students will benefit.
Now's the time to practice stuff you never thought you'd have to. Do it now. You've got 9 days to practice some of this stuff, so you're ready for whatever comes in August.
Right. Do a little bit of research. It's really, again, not just about learning technological things, but how it can help you pedagogically. And you'll notice that we've talked almost entirely this podcast about really pedagogical practices. And as teachers, not just ed tech coaches, the pedagogy always comes first. And if you would like help on that, we are willing to sit down and talk pedagogy. And when we got things dialed in, we can bring in the technological pieces that help expand those horizons.
The technology enhances the pedagogy, not vice versa.
All right, this was a little bit of a heavy cognitive load for me this afternoon.
Yeah, especially with 9 days to go.
Yeah. So hopefully you guys will listen all the way through and give us some feedback. Let us know how things are going. And remember, we would love for you to be part of the show. And you can do that by going to
palmdelesd.org/edtech.
Right on the front page by our podcast, there's a button that says click here if you'd like to be on the show. Fill out the form. We would love to make a show around you.
You drive us, so we want to make sure that we're serving you guys. So let us know. We would love to have you guys on.
So with that, we would like to say this is the end of podcast, I think, number 16, right?
17.
17. See, I'm losing track. I don't even know what day it is. Either way, have a great smooth sailing into the end of the year. I hope things work out. Get some rest this summer. We'll let you know after the next podcast how much longer we will be doing this, if we will be doing this during the summer, and so on.
Have a great weekend, guys.